We are.
Getting married.
We're getting married.
Yes.
Isn't he your secretary?
Assistant?
Executive, assistant secretary titles. But wouldn't be the first time one of us fell for our secretaries, would it, Edwin?
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Hollywood Gold. I'm your host, Daniela Taplin Lundberg, and I'm here with my right hand, Bex Camerata. How are you, Bex?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm so excited about today's episode. Oh my goodness. I just watched The Proposal, the Sandra Bullock, Ryan Reynolds star.
Classic.
For I had not seen it in 10 to 15 years. And I watched it last night and it was so delightful, so sharp. It's like Sandy Bullock at her best, so physically funny. She's such a great comedian. She's like Lucille Ball. And then Ryan Reynolds with these whip smart one-liners. And it just was so fun. It was so fun to watch. So we are interviewing Todd Lieberman, who is our friend. He's an official two-timer. And I can't wait to get going and hear the tale of the tape.
Two-timer makes it sound bad, Daniela. I feel like you should come up with a different phrase. Yeah,
can you help me? I always just let something roll off the tongue and then it sometimes doesn't work. Two-timer sounds like he's been cheating on his wife.
Back for more,
yeah.
Or repeat offender is also bad. I don't know.
Let's workshop this. We have a new Instagram, by the way, Hollywood Gold Pod Instagram page. So go ahead and follow that because that is really going to give you all the insider intel to this burgeoning podcast. But anyways, let's get going with The Proposal and Todd Lieberman, who is a great storyteller. Can't wait.
Let's do it.
Todd Lieberman, two-timer, great producer. So excited that you've joined me again. Thank you.
Pleasure to be here.
So today we've chosen The Proposal, another one of your extreme hits. And I just watched it again last night. Here's what I'm going to say. I laughed. I cried. Everything I want to get out of a movie, I got from your movie. And I want to talk about the intricacy of the plot. I mean, there's so many things I want to talk about. I want to talk about Betty White, Sandy Bullock coming back strong, Ryan Reynolds still had a little bit of a baby face. I just couldn't believe it. I hadn't watched it in a while, so I was reminded of so much. He wasn't quite as cut as he is now, in Deadpool.
How do you know? Oh, I guess he does show up naked. Yeah, okay.
Okay, so start from the beginning and just tell me your first memory, and then you know the drill. I'm going to pepper you with all sorts of questions.
The Proposal is a unique one in that there's a very personal relationship that I have to it.
Oh, can't wait.
I guess the best way to tell the story without getting too much into detail is that when I was a younger person, I had a relationship with an older woman who I happened to work for.
I'm dying. I'm already I'm sweating. I'm so excited. Okay.
And I always thought there was a pretty amazing story to tell in kind of a older woman, younger man workplace romance. Mm-hmm. And there's a script that came to me one day under the name written by someone named Jennifer Kirby. I read it, and it was essentially the story of The Proposal. It was a story about Margaret who wants to get her visa, and they have to pretend to be married to her assistant. Like that, all the stuff was there. And I happened to have lunch with Nita Jacobson, who was running production at Disney at the time.
Who we know. We've interviewed on the pod. Love it.
She's amazing. And we had lunch, and I said, I want to tell you a story. And I basically told her my story.
Todd, can I just stop you and ask, is this someone in the industry?
It's not. No, this was across the country.
Okay. I would have loved to have sussed that out.
Yeah, it's not even that sordid. Just more of a something that I'd always kind of thought would be an interesting movie idea. And I told her my story, and she said, wow, that sounds like a movie. I said, well, funny you should mention that, because I happen to have this script that really represents a lot of the ideas and kind of both absurd and genuine that I wanted to explore in my own story. She ended up buying the script for, if I remember at the time, for scale.
Okay.
And after that, it was revealed to me that the writer was not someone named Jennifer Kirby. The writer was someone named Pete Corelli. Jennifer Kirby was his, at the time, his fiance, and he wrote a romantic comedy under a female pseudonym, and it was written by a man. And so,
did he just do that because he thought it would be received better?
you'd have to ask him that question. But he was working at the time for Kurtzman and Orsi as an executive.
Oh, okay.
And so perhaps there was a bit of writing under a pseudonym for the purpose of people reading a script and saying, "Isn't that the executive?"
Yes.
So that was the beginning of the exercise. And we spent years developing that script.
To me, the plot is so intricate. She's Canadian. She needs to stay. She's going to marry him. That was all there in what you just pitched me. But what wasn't there?
In the original script, he was a little bit more beta, I suppose.
Yeah.
And the idea of casting someone like Ryan, who, gosh, how lucky were we? He has he has the ability to insinuate beta in a comedic way, but there's something very also heavily romantic lead masculine about him.
Yes. It was like a very fine line. I noticed that. Yeah. That's so smart. Okay.
And a lot of the kind of plotting, the setup was the same. And gosh, I'd have to go back and read the old scripts, but the setup was the same. The characters, for the most part, were the same. But we did a lot of plotting and kind of once they get to Alaska, and it was set in Alaska, they were a wealthy family. This was all in the original script. I think we very much extended the amount of time that they ended up staying in Alaska. But part of the issue with one of these scripts is like, okay, so let's say you have a great script. Well, who are the people that are going to play these roles, right?
Yeah.
So we developed it for a long time. And I remember when Nina ended up leaving Disney and Oren Aviv came in, who then took over the role of president of production. David, my former partner, and I had a meeting with him, and we kind of went in and pitched our slate. And I remember horribly pitching the proposal. I was like, there's this script that I love. It's really good. And it's about an assistant, and they have to pretend to marry his boss. And it's really funny. And there's there's a lot of like set pieces. I'm like, I just butchered.
Oh,
the hell
God.
out of it.
Oh.
Yeah, it was terrible. And eventually that script got into the hands of Richard Lovett and Kevin Huvane over at CA, and they really wanted it for Sandy Bullock. And Sandy, at the time, I guess, was looking to play a character that was maybe not so nice on the surface.
In my memory, the proposal felt like a little bit of a comeback for her, and maybe that's just fiction in my memory, but does that resonate for you at all?
Yeah, no, I think that's probably an accurate assessment. If you go back and look at the movies that she'd done at the time, I think there was certainly many years where she was kind of the number one, draw, or romantic comedy draw and otherwise. And then,
Yeah, things ebb and flow, totally.
and I think this came about at a moment in time where she was willing to and excited about going back into that space, so long as there was kind of a twist on it. And that twist was,
Sure.
I want to be a little bit of an a-hole. And so this one fit the bill.
Is she always the one that you had in mind, or was it sort of like luck and happenstance that it sort of fell into her orbit?
I would say it was kind of a little bit of everything. It was all those things together. When they called us and they said, we really think this is something Sandy Bullock would want to do, our immediate response was, my gosh, she'd be amazing and perfect. And how awesome would it be to have Sandy Bullock come back into this world in which she was one of the pillars of.
Totally.
And hadn't done in a while. So got her involved. It took us a few minutes to find the appropriate director. We kind of went through and interviewed several people. I won't mention the names, but there was a bunch of people.
Or you can.
I'm not going to. There was a bunch of people that we talked to. And then we had seen 27 Dresses in an early peek and thought it was really well done. And, David and I were both fans of Step Up, that Anne Fletcher.
Yes, Anne Fletcher. So yeah,
and
totally.
Anne also happened to work with David and I on a movie that we had done several years prior called Bring It Down the House as the choreographer. So we knew Anne, and she read the script, loved it, took a meeting with Sandy. It was an immediate love fest. Anne is just an incredible joy of energy. Sandy and her were an immediate connection. And then it started. The Ryan piece, again, as kind of these movies come together, you sometimes wonder how the stars really do align. And as you had mentioned earlier, Ryan had done a bunch of movies, but he wasn't the gigantic star and kind of industry that he is today. And Sandy and Ryan had known each other.
Just socially, or had they worked together?
They had known each other socially.
Okay.
Ryan was suggested to us. And as a matter of fact, I think if I really think about it, I think it was a conversation that we had with Oren about wanting to make sure that character had enough romantic lead masculinity to be able to carry that, as we talked about before, and counterbalance the I'm the assistant beta part of the character. And so he really just fit that bill. And because Sandy knew him, it kind of all fit together.
Did he read, or did you guys make an offer? Like, where was he in his?
No, we made him an offer. He didn't read for the role. We made him an offer. The one person that did read, that you kind of go back and you're like, why did she come in and read? Betty White actually read for the role. And to this day, I don't know why she did. We would have just hired her on the spot. But I think she wanted to come in and read and prove that she really wanted the role. And yeah, that would have been an easy offer for Betty White. But she
what a national treasure. I mean, you guys really were responsible for bringing her back into the limelight. What a tour de force.
She's incredible. I mean, incredible. So move to Boston, and as it always happens with projects, you're dealing with budgets, you're dealing with over budget, you're dealing with script rewrites. There's a story that I tell a lot in reference to lots of different movies, but it's very specific to this movie. And I give credit to our line producer, Mary McLaglen, on this, who's also an incredible force and wonderful person. There was a set piece in the script where Sandy's character and Ryan's character go into this giant ice cave.
Oh, wow.
While they're in the ice cave, it starts to collapse. And Ryan has to save Sandy from this ice cave and then wrap her in a towel and make sure she's okay. And that's when you start to feel the romance. That set piece, which I felt was incredibly important to the pivotal moment of the character development of the story, and it also happened to have some spectacle, was going to cost us $1 million.
Oh my
The budget
God.
of this movie was not the budget that would substantiate something to that extent. And to Mary's credit, she said to me, I don't think we need that set piece because I just think we need the idea. And the idea of Ryan's character taking care of Sandy's character. And how can we do that same idea for much less money? And that scene ended up becoming the scene where she falls off the boat and he brings her out of the water and puts her in the boat and wraps her in a blanket. So that scene that was going to cost $1 million, we got the exact same emotional idea from something way cheaper, and it didn't matter. And that's a story I use a lot in terms of kind of core emotion, core character. Like, what are you trying to say in the scene? And does the spectacle of it substantiate what you're really trying to say? So it's the creative solutions to expensive problems thing that we always talk about in all these movies. If you have all the money in the world, we would have done that scene. And would it have made it better or worse, or did it matter? Right. And my end hypothesis is it probably didn't matter because we're focused on the characters.
So good.
Andrew,
I'm listening.
would you please, cherries on top, marry me?
Okay, I don't appreciate the sarcasm, but I'll do it. See you at the airport tomorrow.
Good.
The window, to the walls, to the walls, to the sweat drips down my balls. To all you bitches, crawl, all for the, oh, you keep going, bam, to the window, to the wall.
I will say that during some of the rehearsals for this movie, I laughed so hard that I started crying.
Oh God, tell me, because like they were just playing off each other. I mean, they were excellent foils.
Yeah, the process of this movie was fascinating, and I learned a ton on it from everybody involved. In the morning, we would go to set, we would have the scene ready, we'd rehearse the scene, and then depending on kind of how the timing and the rhythm and the movements were going, the scene generally, and I don't want to say every scene, generally was rewritten with Pete Corelli there, based off of the rehearsal that we did.
So you would bring the cast in like with their coffee before they went through the works, rehearse with them and like get the rhythm.
Yep. And then we would rewrite the scene based off that.
Okay.
And there were so many scenes where I couldn't believe how hard I was laughing. I think I even ruined a take, to be honest.
Do you remember any of those like in particular?
Yeah, there was several of them. I mean, the scene where Ryan and Sandy go into the boss's office and she kind of throws, to his utter surprise and dismay, this new plan that she's hatched. And his reaction and their interplay as he's kind of slowly moving up to her. I think I almost threw up laughing. I was like hiding under the desk. And I think we had to stop filming because I was laughing so hard. But there were many of those moments. I mean, some of the stuff in the house when they're talking about their first kiss and just that, I love movies like It Happened One Night where you have two people that just despise each other and they're forced into a situation where they kind of come to an understanding of love. Were a lot of those moments on the spot? Some of those were ad-libbed and then incorporated into, like after there was a rehearsal. Some of those were ad-libbed. A scene that I think is one of the funnier scenes that I've ever been involved in is when the two of them are, slap into each other with their naked bodies. The naked scene. And she falls on top of him and says, "Why are you naked? Why are you wet?" And that was a closed set for obvious reasons. So that scene, to me, I was there. It was funny watching it. But it was more stressful. You just wanted to make sure that both of them felt comfortable. Totally. That no one felt exposed. We didn't really have intimacy coordinators at that time, right? Or did you? Well, there was no intimacy coordinator, but it was a closed set. Like no one could come there. No one could be there. It was very, very well monitored. And we did it a few times. And it was only later when we kind of watched the dailies and then put together the scene that we realized how funny it was. Because on the day we were kind of stressed out. We're like, they're okay. There was a scene actually that we ended up filming in that boat scene when Sandy falls off. The water was really cold. She had to get in that water. She got in that water. That was the real ocean. It wasn't a tank. And we were really in a boat. And she was an absolute trooper. I mean, she kept going in. And she got really cold. I think she almost got hypothermia. We had to kind of take her out. Oh my God. Make sure she was okay. I would imagine. What month were you shooting, Todd? We were there in the spring. Okay. Yeah. So like it had not warmed up yet. It wasn't like summer weather. No, it was, Boston has like, a week of spring and a month of summer. It was, I think it was, March, April, May. Go back to the nude scene because that scene felt very, very orchestrated. Like it seems like it must have taken several days to shoot it. Or did you just get it in one day and you got what you got? My recollection is that was a one-day scene that we weren't going to put them through naked stacking for more than one day. But no, she's an incredible comedian, physically for sure. I remember one of the scenes that I remember reading when I read the original spec was the to the window, to the wall. I remember reading that scene when she's kind of chanting around the fireplace and laughing out loud reading that scene. And it was actually a debatable scene in the movie. Like there were some people, I was not one of them. There were some people who felt that scene was too broad. And my argument back was if it gets people to laugh and we're not kind of losing credibility with the characters and we're keeping the relationships truthful, then I think it sustains. And The audience really loved it. But the balance, I think what's interesting about this film and why I think it resonates is because it's both funny, but it's also vulnerable.
Yes.
And there's like a genuine heart and emotion to it. You know, when we were done with the film and we would test screen it, it always got great responses. But there was something funky about the end. And the end that you see in this movie is a reshoot to the end we actually
I always love hearing this.
In the original film, it all kind of took place at the airport. They go to the airport, Sandy's on the plane. There's an interplay with the stewardess, was played by Niecy Nash. And Sandy ends up getting off the plane and they kind of end up kissing on the tarmac.
Okay.
And there was something, it was funny, but it wasn't as emotionally satisfying
Sure.
as the movie
Felt too quick.
promised. Exactly. So we ended up reconstructing that whole, going back to the office, having the rest of the family come in, the big kind of speech between the two of them. And boy, we sat for days with Pete Corelli. I remember Anne and Pete and I would sit in my office for days on end, kind of thinking about what that balance is between the emotion and the comedy. And I think typically, and this is not wrong, typically the note that one would get from the studio is, funny's money. Like, just make it funny and it'll be great. And while we generally agreed with that concept, we fundamentally disagreed with a part of that concept, which is we also wanted to infuse real emotion into that funny so you could balance the both.
Yes.
So we ended up spending a long time figuring out how to construct that end scene, what that end speech would be like. And the line, "Marry me so I can date you," was kind of a line that came out of those meetings. And this idea of "I'm scared," right, was, I felt, kind of a linchpin to eventually bringing her character full circle and allowing that vulnerability to showcase itself, to then allow for the comedy to happen, right? Now, I will say that was a highly debated topic. And again, I'm not there's no blame to go here, because I think in a normal circumstance, yeah, funny's money. And you want to, if you're doing a reshoot, you want to make sure that reshoot is worth it and really, really funny. Because we did that reshoot in LA, they spent $1 million rebuilding that office set. So to the studio's credit, they allowed us to do it. And frankly, they were suggesting that we do it. And on the day, we made some additional changes where Betty White and the families, they came in earlier and were kind of part of the comedic gag of what was going on at the time. And it felt like it was stepping on the emotion. So
So you had them there on the day? You had like Betty White there
Yep.
in the office on the day?
Yep.
Oh my gosh, that's so interesting. So did you shoot both versions, Todd, or did you?
we shot both versions, and then eventually we said, you know what, we're not going to use that version.
Wow.
Once we tested that version, where we allowed the audience to feel something genuine and really lock into the two of their vulnerability, their fears, their whatever, and then do the kiss, and then kind of let it out by having the coworkers there, and then doing that title sequence, the score shot up. And it was like, that's what it was. Not that it was missing something, but that's what it was missing for a full circle culmination, and the reason to do the reshoot. The reason to do the reshoot, I think, was the emotion.
Well, I'm going to say two things. Part of my fear of like seeing her back in the office is that she's just going to forget what happened. And then she like offers that vulnerability, and I'm like, oh, it's real. Like, it didn't just happen in Alaska. Like, she's a changed person. And that was like so rewarding. So like, good on you for that. And then also being in the office, I felt like I had like a little working girl vibe, which is one of my favorite all time like romantic comedies, which is like so elevated. It reminded me of like the great romantic comedies of our time, whether it was intended or not. I just thought you guys really nailed the ending.
Thank you. That was stressful, as I recall, to find it. And, as a producer, from the producer side of things, if you assemble the team that you believe in and trust in, and everyone is thinking about and feeling the same thing, the script is kind of a guide, right? And, I felt like there were certainly instances during the course of this movie, many of them, where the trust in our two leads of kind of understanding how they would feel and what they would say, like superseded whatever belief I had in the particular scene. And so being able to kind of turn over that trust into people that get it was gratifying and turned out to be great. And that's why I cite this movie a lot as one of the better experiences I've had just in terms of a collaboration, because we all, like the group of us, the core group who was making the movie, were so in sync that it was a lot of a take and a give and a give and a take, and it was fun and it yielded great results, and we all laughed, and there wasn't it was stressful because it felt like we were kind of putting on a show like you would in theater, but it wasn't stressful because there was a bad apple or someone was pissed off. It was truly a very unified, fun team effort.
I mean, I think you just hit upon the reason I love it so much. Every character feels so wholly that actor's strengths and abilities, and like, Ryan Reynolds able to deliver those one-liners, like, when he spills the coffee and he gets her another one and she like sees that it's actually he bought two, and he goes, well, that would be pathetic. Like, if I bought two coffees for, in case I drop one,
a lot of those definitely were his ad libs. Like, this is
oh my God,
Christmas in a cup. I mean, a lot of those things were just things that came out of Ryan's mouth. Speaking of that coffee scene, one of the more embarrassing moments in my life, I think, took place during the course of that scene. We were casting locally for a lot of the not only background, but kind of some of the day players, folks who had a line or two. And for the life of us, we could not find the perfect person to deliver a line opposite Ryan Reynolds once that coffee gets spilled. The person who essentially spills it on him bumps into him.
Yes, the mailroom guy.
I was having dinner with the head of casting at Disney, who was helping casting the movie. Kathy Sandrich was the casting director, and the head of casting at Disney's Marsha Ross and Ann Fletcher. And they said, we can't find this person. And they both looked at me and they said, you're going to do it. And I said, I don't think so. They was like, no, you're going to do it. And like, while we're sitting there, I think Marsha was calling SAG and she's like, we're going to go. Anyways, I ended up doing it. And
got Taft-Hartley.
I got Taft-Hartley. And I do this. Oh my gosh. I do this.
Say.
No, I'd say I was acting opposite Ryan Reynolds, and it was abundantly clear that one was one of the greatest living comedians and the other one just sucked. And you can only guess which one was which. And so once we saw the cut of the movie.
No, stop.
I said, Anne and our amazing editor, Priscilla, and the scene plays, and it's fucking awful. I mean, it's just like you just can't even look at it. I look at that guy, I'm like, and we're all silent. And then I said, guys, you have to cut that. And I had some stupid line I said, and they both looked at each other and me, and they're like, oh, thank God.
No.
They didn't want to insult me, but I'm like, you have to cut. That's like the worst thing I've ever seen.
It gives you such respect for performers, because it's like the one thing I could never do. I would be a horrible actor.
It's a skill set that very, very few people have. Many people think they do. And very few people do.
Yes.
And the ones who do it really well.
So did you reshoot it?
No, we just cut that guy out.
Okay. That was
the line is still there. I think like my line is somewhere in the background coming from someone else who's probably better actor, even though it's my words. And so that character was just sliced from the film.
But you're glad you did. I did it on Harriet. I was like, it was day one. It was like my first studio film. I was like walking around with a clipboard, like thanking people. And Casey Lemons like comes up to me and she like looks me up and down. She's like, "You're the only white woman not working, so we're going to need you to go through the works." And I played the like abolitionist farmer's wife. It was like so demoralizing. Yeah. I stayed in the movie, but like it was so obvious that it was just because like the producers are one thing, not like actually doing anything. I mean, we are, but you know what I mean? Yeah. It's like you have the time.
Yeah.
Oh! What the? Oh my God! Why are you naked?
Why are you wet?
Well, hello there. Now, do you prefer being called Margaret or Satan's mistress? We've heard it both ways. Actually, we've heard it lots of ways.
She's kidding.
Okay.
And the supporting cast was so good also. I mean, we didn't even get into them, but like Betty White, obviously like a national treasure. Classic. Was she really as sprightly as it appeared? She seemed to have so much energy.
Sweetest person in the world. There's a video that we ended up doing for, at the time, Funny or Die, one of those promotional videos. Go online and check it out. Just look at the Funny or Die video for the proposal. It was another one that we ended up spending a lot of time writing. It was kind of a fake behind the scenes. You know, Ryan's getting no respect, and
yeah, like she's really mean to Ryan.
Yep, Sandy's getting all the respect. Ryan's getting no respect. No one knows who he is. And then Betty White comes in, and Betty thinks he's an assistant in real life, not just the movie. And so in the script, we had Betty swearing and, you know, calling Ryan nasty names. And to her sweet credit, she wouldn't curse. And she said, "I'm not saying these lines." And so when you watch the video, we ended up placing bleeps in there over things that weren't swear words, just so it insinuated that she was swearing, even though she wasn't. So is she sprightly? She's whip smart, really amazing woman, just a truly amazing woman. Sandy and Anne and I ended up having dinner with her a few years later, and we were trying to make it kind of a yearly thing. And you know, people got busy, and you know, tragically, Betty passed away. Not tragic.
Yeah,
she was quite old, but
she lived
quite a life.
Man. Yeah,
but yeah, she was absolutely wonderful. And then Craig T. Nelson was great. Mary Steenburgen was great.
Oscar from The Office. I can never remember his actual name, but he's
amazing.
So good. Obviously, it was always intended for him to play all those parts.
Yes.
Okay.
That guy would show up. It's like small town worker shows up everywhere. He was and that was an idea that I think Anne had specifically. Oscar Nunez. She's like, you know, he's perfect for this. And yeah, she just called him in. And
so good. No holds barred. Just so bizarre.
Like an adorable weirdo as a character.
So Todd, like when you scored those numbers, did you know in your heart you're like, this is a hit?
I don't think I ever translate numbers into hit. What I do is I like to kind of gauge an audience and the response from an audience. So sitting in a room, you can feel the energy. And so what I knew that we had was a movie that played extraordinarily well with audiences. And the responses that I'd gotten from people who had seen the movie, basically saying how much they loved it, I knew that we had something that worked really well. How that gets marketed, where it goes, when it comes out, how it gets publicized, all those things, you know, that's the next step of the process. And Disney at the time did an incredible job kind of putting the whole campaign together. It did well both internationally and domestically. So yeah, it turned out to be a great hit. But you know, you can never know that. At least I can't from the scores. All I know is at the time oh, it's scoring extraordinarily well, but I'm also feeling the audience and I'm feeling how they're interacting with the movie and listening kind of afterwards to kind of what people are saying. I knew that we had something that was very resonant with audiences.
Yeah.
And other people don't quite know it yet. So you have a lot of information that other people don't. And I remember having lunch with a high profile executive at the time before the movie came out. And they're like, yeah, I think you guys are going to do well. I think you'll make like 12, I think 12 opening weekend. And I looked at this person, I'm like, huh, they really don't know. And that's okay, because why should they?
They will soon enough.
Yeah, and the movie comes out, it makes whatever it made, 30, or I don't remember the exact number, but it definitely overperformed what people thought it was going to do. But from our perspective, we knew we had it. So it wasn't as much a surprise as it was, yeah, like we knew it a movie that worked really well with audiences, and now audiences seem to like it.
You'll get on the phone with the distribution team after your first weekend, and like you have these calls where like suddenly everyone's really jacked and they're like, let's keep going, let's keep pushing it out. Do you remember those at all? The feeling of like, let's ride this wind, like let's keep pushing it kind of thing?
I had there was a superstition that I had at the time where any movie that we would do, I'd call Chuck Vian, who was head of distribution over at Disney, who's a legend in the distribution world, and I'd say, Chuck, my superstition is we need to release the movie at the Grove. And so anytime we'd release a movie,
because that's done well for you historically.
It always seemed to work. Like Grove, do a dinner beforehand, the movie over. And so this was another one where I said, Chuck, you got to get me the Grove. And so we did, we did our pre-dinner, we do the whole thing, we go there.
And is it with your family or is it with like the cast and crew? Like what kind?
At the time, I don't remember exactly who came, but it was usually the director or some of the studio people. If the cast is around, like we'll do a Maggiano's dinner or something. I don't even know if Maggiano's still at the Grove.
Okay.
So we do a Maggiano's dinner, and then we'd go go into the theaters. And I remember in that one, they were adding new times after. And so Chuck would be calling us during the course of that evening saying, hey, you got this, we're looking at this number, we're looking at this number. And then the best part of those days, and this isn't to wax nostalgic on, the times of when everything was theatrical and the box office wasn't reported every 5 seconds, you'd get that call the next morning. You'd be like, all right, so here's exactly what we did, and here's what we're projecting. And then, you'd get that call on Sunday morning and say, all right, here's what we did say. Whoa, we overperformed Saturday. And that was the trajectory of the proposal. It was theaters were adding times, they were moving into bigger theaters, and kind of as it kept going during the course of the weekend, we were gaining momentum, and we were getting those like updates from the distribution folks, which was super fun.
Just the best, the best. Man, that's such a great story. I love hearing about it. It is a film that I just feel like is now having this like new life on Netflix. It was on earlier in the year or and I feel like people like, this younger generation doesn't really have sort of elevated rom-coms like this, where it's like top tier talent, just like giving their best. Do you feel like it's going to have an impact on the industry, just like this younger generation discovering movies like your movie?
I hope so. What's really fascinating to me about The Proposal in particular is that if The Proposal were released today, the exact same movie, like forget kind of the way social dynamics have changed. That's a whole different discussion about office politics and all that. Forget that for a second. Let's just pretend the movie was released today in a world in which we accept all the things in that movie as okay. It has a Rotten Tomatoes score in the 40s, I think.
Right.
And
audiences loved it, but critics were just
does that affect how people take in that movie today? Does that affect the way people perceive it? Yeah, I do think people perceive that movie as, one of the I can't use the word class. I'm trying to think of a better.
No, it's legacy. It's like it is
a rom-com staple, and yet it was not received well by critics. So I suppose if there was something that I would hope could be influenced by something like The Proposal, is that movies that are massive audience pleasers that don't necessarily register in the same way with critics, I would hope that we can still look at those movies as hits and potentially, longer term legacy, great films.
I think it's a better movie than critics gave it credit for at the time. And who knows what the reasons for that are, but it does hold up. Like I consider myself a discerning viewer, and I was like, this is a sharp script. It's as sharp a script and laugh out loud funny and emotional as anything I've seen recently. And so maybe it's because the streamers are just making sort of lower 5 versions of this, but I put it in the lexicon, man. It's a legacy film.
Yeah. That's nice. Thank you. Well, I think, I do think the balance of genuine laughs, set pieces, right? Real set pieces with an open, vulnerable, emotional relationship. That's not pat. That's not kind of going through the motions of really trying to uncover deep emotional truths. I think those two things combined, yeah, I think that would be incredible if lots of those movies happened where we could laugh, not to be trite, we can laugh and we can cry.
Right.
The fun closing of the circle for that movie was when it was nominated for the People's Choice Award, and we were up against The Hangover, the first Hangover, in the comedy section, like best comedy. And we all assumed that The Hangover would win, and lo and behold, The Proposal won, the People's Choice for best comedy. So I guess that really is the answer of people love the movie.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And you did the work. Those set pieces were truly hilarious. And you weren't just hanging out your hat on the romance,
Yes.
Todd Lieberman, you're a delight. Always such a good storyteller. Thank you for doing this. I'm going to ask you back.
I have to make another movie worthy of.
No, I already decided.
So, Margaret, marry me. Because I'd like to date you.
Okay, so Todd Lieberman, as promised, great storyteller, knows what we want to hear, such a good producer. I always feel like I pick up a gem or two from him. He's a very astute producer, so he's always communicating what he's learned through the process and the tens of hundreds of movies he's produced at this point. So it was so fun to hear about the making of this movie and what a joyous set it was. I love hearing that because sometimes joyous sets make bad movies. Have you ever heard that?
Yes. I feel like it can go either way.
It's too easy, and so no one's really doing the work.
It's too fun sometimes.
But it sounds like they did the work and they also had fun, and they had just a great cast and crew.
And I think that's the thing. That cast is so iconic. It's so, when you have that mix, I mean, like you said at the beginning, this was before Ryan Reynolds was really Ryan Reynolds and the force that he is now. But even in that movie, he's so good. He's so funny. The pairing of him and Sandra Bullock is perfect in my opinion. And you throw Betty White in there, and then just the whole thing works so well. And it's funny. I was actually thinking back on this when he was talking. This is just a totally anecdotal side note, but as you know, I love Sandra Bullock. I loved While You Were Sleeping, one of my favorite movies of all time. And it's funny because I remember my first memory of watching this movie. I had this phase where I was really, really into Sandra Bullock movies, just obsessed with them. Whenever a new one came out, I was I have to watch
Miss Congeniality, whatever it was.
I watched Miss Congeniality on repeat all night. The night that I first saw it, I just because we video on demanded it, right? And rented it, and you had it for 24 hours. And so I didn't sleep all night, just stayed up and watched it.
It was just on a loop.
Just on a loop. And my mom came out to go to the bathroom at 3 a.m. and was like, "Are you still watching this movie?" I was like, "Yes, Mom." Yes, I am.
Facts. That is amazing.
But I had these, this is probably so embarrassing. Every time I saw a Sandra Bullock movie, I wanted to, my life goal was to be whatever her character was. So while you were sleeping, I wanted to be like the token taker at the L or a Subway. And then I saw Miss Congeniality and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be an FBI agent. And I remember seeing the proposal and being like, no, I'm going to be like a badass boss lady.
It extended through all those years. I feel like that's a good 10 to 15 year period.
But I have to say the proposal was the one I saw. And then I was like, remembering all those times when I thought that I wanted to be whoever Sandra Bullock was in these movies. And I was like, oh, maybe I just want to make movies. Maybe I just want to tell these stories.
What's the theme here? Oh,
so anyway,
my God.
This is like a
so
seminal movie for me.
I don't think I was aware of how big a Sandra Bullock fan you were.
Yeah. Big fan.
That was Julia Roberts for me. That was Julia Roberts for me. I that was a time in my life where I would just go to anything Julia Roberts was in. So I just feel like those actresses of yore, Julia Roberts and Sandra Bullock in particular, they had such a range. They were almost funny first, it felt like, or they're the effervescence was what led. And so I don't know if I feel that way about any of the actresses today. I think about Florence Pugh is one of the greatest working actresses today. And she just feels more serious, there's less.
Well, I feel like that used to be how you would break out as a female actress back in the 90s and the 80s and whatever. You had to do a big comedy. Or a rom-com. That's what people wanted to see, pretty women in.
That's how stars were made. Yeah. I mean, we talked a lot about that with Glickman.
Yeah. Now I think that there are more options for breaking into the industry. They still are sadly more limited for women as they are for men. But I do think that it's more possible to start as a serious actress now and break out like Jennifer Lawrence,
Well, Jennifer Lawrence is she's a real comedian. I mean, I made, that movie, No Hard Feelings. She carried that movie. She was legitimately funny in every scene. She was the proper star of that. But you're right. She started out as a dramatic actress, and then she went to do Hunger Games and was an action star.
Phenomenon. Right.
All right, guys. Well, that was such a fun one. We could talk all day about also Todd Lieberman being in the movie and then being cut out. That was hilarious.
But I loved how self-aware both you and he were about those moments that you have.
Mortifying. Just not a proud moment. You know what I mean?
I'm meant to be behind the scenes.
I'm just proud I didn't get cut out of Harriet. I mean, that could have very, very easily happened and I would never have said a thing. I would have just pretended it never happened, It's like silent farts. You just pretend they never happened and and maybe no one will notice.
Well,
that's what a producer being in a movie is like.
Funnily enough, fun fact for our loyal listeners about Stay Gold, you cameoed in that movie and you have an actual close-up shot of your face. Proper yes. It's you on
my
screen.
God. I know it's
and
coming.
then I cameoed in that movie with your family. I'm
with my three children
the,
and my
mom
husband.
To your 3 kids, and I'm next to your husband, or maybe I'm the nanny. I don't know, or I'm married to Ted. I don't know, but it was one of those weird things where and Becca, this is your family, and I'm you mean my
Bex? How tall are you?
Is my family? I'm 5'2".
Bex, how tall are you? Okay,
on a good day.
Bex is 5'2". My husband is 6'4". Okay, and he's wearing a top hat in the film, so he's like Abe Lincoln. So he's easily 6'7" in the movie. And then my daughters are enormous. My daughter is a rower. She's 5'10". And so the mom is shorter than the children.
And also I look nothing like your kids. They're all blonde. And I have this crazy curly dark hair. It was just some of those really funny.
What a day.
On set.
It's something we'll never forget. How about when the AD had to stop the action because Ted was still wearing his digital watch and they're Mr. Lundberg, can you take off your digital watch? It's like Harriet Tubman. We're at the turn of the century.
Oh, but these are moments we'll never forget.
Okay, guys, don't forget your merch. It's at staygoldfeatures.com. Don't forget to follow and subscribe. That is so, so critical to our ongoing success. If you want to keep hearing us, you got to just follow because that just ramps up our numbers, which is critical. And we'll see you next time.
And stay gold.
Stay gold.